Right, so welcome to the Maidstone United podcast. You may have listened to a match preview or two during the season, but we've got something a little bit different for you this time. In a moment, we'll be speaking to the club's co-owners, Oliver Ash and Terry Casey, about matters on and off the pitch. And in just a little bit, Fred Atkins will be asking the owners some of the questions that were sent in via the Supporters Club. Ironically, one of those questions was whether the time of this podcast was to do with the annual accounts being published, and a gold star for that question, and probably a good place to start our interview today. And Oliver, perhaps you could run us through those headline figures from that historic FA Cup season.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. With pleasure. I mean, we've announced the results very recently. I think we put a statement out, so anybody who's interested in the numbers can look at that and get some of the numbers and some of our analysis of the numbers. But in general, it was a very successful season on the field. Obviously, probably the most successful season the club has ever had on the field, with the highlight being, of course, the victory at Ipswich, which could well be argued to be the best match and best result the club has ever had. So that's something that very special to take with us kind of forever. And the results on sort of in financial terms, thanks to the FA Cup run, were very positive and have sort of helped us to get through the season where, to be frank, there was an underlying loss, which was the second year running where we've had an underlying loss. And Terry and I have reflected on that to the extent that it shows that it's becoming harder and harder to run the club, making a profit and enabling us to continue to run it as sustainably as possible. So the FA Cup run, to some degree, sort of saved us and helped us through a difficult period and enabled us to do the capital expenditure that we had to do. In particular, the pitch, that was the most important part of it, but also to launch a number of other projects around the ground, which are either finished or ongoing. So yeah, it was a very, very successful season. I can only pray and hope that we have another season or two like it in the years to come.
Good way to start. If I hand over to Fred at this point, as I say, we've asked the Supporters Club to come up with some questions, which the chair, Nigel Tyler, has been sending in to us over the last few days. So, Fred, over to you, sir.
Okay. Well, the first topic we've got is about the first team. And the first question is for Terry. This one is, how do you think the recruitment process has gone this season?
Yeah, morning, everybody. We've been pleased with it, but we're far from satisfied or far from being complacent about it, because it's such a crucial part of the work that we do, and we do have a committee now, rather than just one or two people making decisions. And although the word committee strikes terror into everybody, this is just a proactive group of people who, including me, who think they know something about football, and George and Bill Williams and Craig Fagan and Zach. And when we sign a player, we all reflect on whether it's a good signing or not. I look at the financial side, and Zach looks at the statistics, and Bill looks at all different angles. So we've got it better than it ever was, but we're a long way short of perfection.
If I could, I'll come in as well. I agree with what Terry said, and it's exactly that I think there's one of the many cliches in sort of business is to say that perfect is the enemy of good, which is a horrible thing, really, but it does say exactly what the situation is that we'll never be perfect on recruitment. It's a very difficult process in football, like in any other walk of life. You have to make choices sometimes based on fairly scant information, and we don't get it right all the time. But I think, as Terry said, this season we've got some terrific players in. There's been one or two that have, let's say, fallen short of our hopes. I won't name any names, but you look at the sort of the group of 15 or 16 that we can put out at the moment, and we've got some terrific players, and that's the reason why we've had a successful season so far.
Could I just follow up on that slightly, because I'm sure that whoever asked that question was probably thinking of the Matt Rush situation just before Christmas.
Yeah, well, with regards to Matt Rush, he was loaned to us anyway by Sutton. Then Bournemouth came in with an offer of paying a transfer fee. I don't know what it was, but I think Boreham would have offered, I don't know, quite good money, and also offered Matt a longer deal with higher wages. So we not very much we can do really. It was taken away from us, and but we did negotiate hard with Matt Rush to sign him at the start of the season, and he went to a higher offer from Sutton. We then brought him back, and we thought we looked after him as best that we could. And then he went again, so he sort of rejected us twice. And although it's disappointing to lose him, there's almost nothing we can do about it without throwing an awful lot of money at it, which we can't do.
Leads us into the next question, which is, if we get promoted, is the player budget going to increase? Because whoever the questioner is has said that they would personally prefer not to get promoted.
I get what they say. They don't want to break the bank. They don't have a season where you're battling to survive on the pitch every game. And it's a really difficult conundrum. We have to go to try and get promoted to the National League, and we have to try and stay in the National League. What comes with that is a whole host of different challenges, and one of the challenges is that I think I'm not quite sure, but teams like Carlisle and Morecambe come down. We're going to have around about 15 overnight stays, and as we found to our cost at Truro, an overnight stay costs about £5,000 just to make the fixture. That's hotel bills and all the rest of the coaches. So that's one of the implications of being in the National League, that you have to have all these overnights. So if you have 15 times 5, it's £75,000 just to sustain the away fixtures. So it comes at a price to get into the National League. And then, of course, everything that goes with it. I mean, if we put out a team with the same budget, I think we'd struggle to stay in the National League. So the answer to that is, if we made it to the National League, we'd have to look seriously at trying to increase the budget, because players in the National League, they expect to earn more money. So I don't know whether I've answered it, except to say that we do want to be in the National League, and we do want to find more money for a better playing squad, but it does come with implications and costs.
Okay, the next question, which is a change of tack slightly, is why are the players' names not on the back of their shirts? And the questioner thinks this looks unprofessional.
This is linked, I mean, all the questions are linked really to the sort of the slightly boring answer, which, I mean, it's like a broken record really, but I could say this every time, is that what we're able to spend at the club depends entirely on what we can raise in revenue. So there's a choice in every single area of expenditure. So if we decide we're going to spend more money putting names on shirts, which also has an inconvenience factor, because when players join and they need to be ready to play the next day, you may not have a shirt for them. But anything that has a cost, you have to measure it up against, is that worth spending that money? Because that money that's spent on a shirt or on a new signboard or something is money that won't go into the playing budget. And our entire modus operandi is to try and put as much revenue as we can into the playing budget. We look at the revenues, we look at the costs, and whatever's the difference goes into the playing budget. So every time people say to us, why don't you build this? Why don't you add that? It's very simple. If you do that, you'll reduce the player budget. And the shirt names is just one example of that. There are plenty of other clubs that don't have names on shirts. I mean, I think it's a luxury at this level, personally. It's not necessary. And I'd rather have the money that would cost to go into the playing budget.
Okay, so if we go back to the playing budget, have any of the current squad been offered deals for next season?
They've been contacted in writing with offers, and we're waiting for the replies from them. I think we've offered seven. I think seven of our current squad have been offered new deals.
But presumably, you're not going to say who they are.
No, it's probably not a good idea to say who they are.
No.
It wouldn't be fair to them. It wouldn't be fair to them. We've got to give them the chance to consider the offers and work out whether it's going to work out for them. And we're just hoping they come back and give us a positive response.
Also, it is a difficult subject because, of course, we don't know what division we're going to be playing in next year, and players that we might want to keep they and their agents might well wish to sit on the fence while that uncertainty is around, and that you have to live with that, as we did last season.
Okay, well, the final question on the first team is it's similar sort of vein to some of the others. Is how serious is the club about winning promotion via the playoffs, and would staying in the National League be realistic with the current budgets and investments?
Yeah, we're deadly serious about getting promoted to the National League. Personally, it concerns me because we've had 2 trips into the National League and they've ended in tears. And I famously said the second time, yeah, we've got it organised. We know what we're doing this time. So I won't say that again. But we've got to go for the National League. There's no question in my mind. We have to go for it. And the budgets, as I've already spoken a little bit about the budget, it will cost a lot more. And Oliver says, if you spend £75,000 on overnight accommodation, coach, away trips, that comes out of the budget. So it's a very difficult balancing act that we're trying to compete. But we have to compete for every header and every tackle throughout the last half a dozen games of the season, then into the playoffs. That I'd be cheering like everybody else if we did get promoted. So yeah, the answer is yes.
Yeah, we lose. Don't forget, we lose something like 100 grand of revenue because we can't drink alcohol in sight of the pitch, and the handout, the actual contribution from the league in terms of money is minimal. So we get maybe another £50,000 on top of what paltry amount we get for being in the National League South. That hardly scratches the surface of the extra costs that we have, as Terry said, the travel costs. But despite all of that, we'll battle and we'll do what we can to work out how we can increase the budget, whether we can, we'll try and ask our sponsors for more contribution to get the playing budget as high as we can. And then obviously the second thing is you get a playing budget that's high, and we try and do our damnedest to make the best decisions on recruitment. So we recruit the Aaron Blairs and the Joe Pigots and give ourselves the best chance to do well in the National League. But it will certainly be tough.
Okay, we're going to move on to stadium development now. The first question is, do you reckon an extra stand will ever be put on the park end, that's the riverside of the stadium?
The riverside.
Or the riverside.
We did have outline planning drawings for a development over on that side, but it would cost in excess of £1 million to put a stand on there. I mean, that would well in excess of £1 million. It wouldn't necessarily add to our capacity. So yeah, I don't think at the moment that's not on our shopping list, a stand on the riverside.
I mean, even something like the stuff that Eastbourne have got along the far side of their ground, where it's sort of 3 deep terracing and roofing, would that cost around about £1 million?
I've been to Eastbourne a few times, Fred, but they've just got some covered terracing.
Yeah,
I don't know the answer to that, to be perfectly honest with you, Fred, because there are no plans to develop the riverside at the moment. It wouldn't add to our capacity.
It would just be, unfortunately, on the west side. I think when we did look at that, Terry, about 6 years ago, even then it was going to cost nearly £1 million, and we know that building cost inflation has taken those costs probably double. And we had the plans in place for a 600 or 700 seater neat stand, a really neat stand. But it involves, just take a basic thing. To build that, you would have to push the fence back to the limits of where we bought the extra strip of land a few years ago. To move that fence would, again, probably cost not far off 200 grand. These are amounts, unfortunately, we just don't have. We're not in a position to spend those sorts of amounts. And when we break even every year, if we're able to break even, it means we're not actually creating any surplus for spending money on capital projects. So right now, and we'll go on to obviously to talk about the subject of how we're getting on and trying to move the club on, perhaps to investors with deeper pockets than we have at the moment. Until we do that, those sorts of projects are just not possible. So we can occasionally do projects that are necessary but relatively small scale, replacing the washrooms at the town end, which in itself, you might think replacing a porter cabin, what could be easier? That's cost probably more than 100,000, I think. It's crazy the way building costs are. And again, all of this money comes out of ultimately the net playing budget. So we try and limit those sorts of expenses. So to build a West Stand is certainly not going to happen while Terry and I are still running the club.
So the next question is a follow-up to that, and that is, what is the next ground improvement going to be? And is there a possibility of a Genco-style stand in the town end? Which I guess, having said what you've just said, you probably just answered.
I think we pretty much answered that. I mean, the cost of those types of developments, $1 million is just an easy figure that slips off the tongue, but it would be much more than £1 million.
Well, we did that project. We master planned it in days perhaps when our eyes were bigger than our wallets, and I remember that even at that time, because we had to put, you have to put seating in, and we were thinking, what would we need to do when the club aspires to be in the Football League, in League Two, and it involves putting in a lot more seats. And even then, I recall a figure of something like 2 million or 2.5 million. And that's back 6 or 7 years, and that would now be 4 or 5 million to do a really nice stand at the town end. So one day, goodness knows, we hope that'll be possible. I mean, nothing would could have pleased me and excite me more than the idea of the ground built out to a 5,000 or 6,000 capacity with 2,000 seats, and the club playing in League Two. It's just right now it's not tenable. We have to keep going with our current. With the current levels of revenue and project, and we're not in that sphere at the moment.
Okay, well, to go from sort of one end of the scale to almost the opposite, when are the new town end toilets coming? And the same goes for when will there be improved food vending in the town end, because not all home fans use the Genco end.
Well, I'll leave that one to Terry. He's the manager of the toilets and the food provision.
The toilets will go in at the end after the season has ended. We just made that decision on the basis that we've just got one. We got one segregated game at the end of the season, and we just felt it was more appropriate just to start that project while there was fewer people around the stadium. The food, the catering. Well, the catering is a massive issue, and we will deal with it in some depth. But the Genco end is it should have more food provisions. We're aware of that. We've got currently a pop-up type arrangement, but that we are going to renovate the old pie hut, but it's going to take a bit of money and a bit of time. So we are short on food at that end. But the catering thing was all linked into the segregation. The segregation plan was to encourage people to go to the Genco end. But we do accept that there are a number of people who want to stay in the town end. In fact, we did a lot of consultations with people who stay at the town end to watch their games. But I think we probably missed a trick. We didn't get the catering in soon enough at the town end, but that's going to be remedied for next year. There will be catering, and of course we've got the outside bar there, which will also offer food as well. So there will be catering for next season. The last couple of games would just be the pop-up down that end, and also the outside bar. And of course you've got Spitfire there, where the catering in terms of drinks can be got. But I think we're a bit slow on the uptake with food outlets on the town end.
Okay, next one is about the corner behind the security offices next to the Genco, which our question is basically wasted land. Why can't we put a new big club shop on there, or a bar with a balcony to oversee the game, presumably like the one at Hampton?
It's the same answer. It just would compromise everything we're trying to do in terms of breaking even. But it's a brilliant idea. I mean, I live with somebody who tells me all the brilliant ideas that could be done at the ground, all the development and improvements. I couldn't agree more, but it's we just don't have that level of money.
Slightly more affordably, our last questioner for this section says, I would like to ask, why the speakers are not working in the town end. I cannot hear anything that's going on. Maybe Ian could answer that one.
Yeah, we are very aware of that, and that's a project that will be remedied over the summer. So yes, I don't know whether people want to hear me in particular, so they might be pleased that they can't. But no, it is on the summer project list.
Okay, well, we're going to switch to catering now. I think it's a burning issue for a lot of our supporters. So the first question is, are they going to improve the catering? It used to be some of the best food in non-league.
We had loads of reasons behind why we had to change the catering. We had a difficult situation at the start of the season where we didn't own the catering huts. They were owned by the people that were were delivering the catering, and that put us in a lot of difficulty because the catering huts were not fit for purpose. The problem with that is because we didn't own the huts, and we were wholly dependent on other people, we had to make a difficult decision. And the first one was that we have to regain ownership of the huts in the best interests of the club. We had to regain ownership of the huts, and we had to pay compensation to them as well. We then appointed somebody who really tried his hardest and worked very hard, and it didn't work out. People were disappointed, quite rightly. But that's improved. There's no question about it. It's improved, and it's going to continue to improve. And then in the close season, we're going to have another look at how we deliver the food, whether we take it over ourselves or whether we sort of pass it on to other people. So it was a difficult time. I'm aware we got a lot of criticism, and it was a bit disappointing because we didn't have an opportunity to explain what we're trying to do. But Maidstone Football Club is in a better position because at least we own everything, and the future is better. But that costs money. Again, it costs money because we had to compensate people, and we had to build new huts. But it's a better place now, and it'll be better next season, whatever decisions we take. But we're conscious of the fact that people have been unhappy with it.
Well, that answer probably covers the next question, which was, will the food services be re-tendered for next season? I think you've just answered that, really.
We're looking at that. Yeah, we're looking at that whole issue in the close season. Yeah, definitely.
Question 3 in this section: is the club aware of the perception that this fan experience has been allowed to atrophy?
We're aware of the dissatisfaction and the unhappiness. Definitely aware of it, and as I've said, we've got to do better. We are doing better. We're working hard at it.
And the final question in this section, which is basically a follow-up to that, is are you aware that this is affecting the pre-match atmosphere, as most people are now eating before they go to the ground?
We've talked about the food, but I think in terms of, I'd like to be positive about the things that we have done and things that are being done around the ground as well. And the pre-match atmosphere, well, it depends on another thing. It depends on the way the ground's set up. We've, together with the help of our sponsors and Shepherd Neame, we've now got a sort of a seated area. The Genco end is completely different to what it was 2 years ago in terms of an attractive bar. We've put some decoration up to glory the team that won the league a couple of years ago. It's a totally different experience. I think that's very, very positive. So we mustn't lose sight of the positives. And the other thing we alluded to earlier is the segregation. We have, thank goodness, got rid of the situation where our fans and rival fans were glaring or worse at each other across the divide in the Genco end. So I won't hear anyone saying, "Oh, that spoiled the atmosphere." What a load of nonsense. We've now got a home end and an away corner, which, look, it functions pretty well so far. I think, hats off to Terry and Bob and the others who've worked on that. It's still not perfect, and we've still got issues to deal with when we get a team that wants to bring 500 or 600, but it's a huge improvement. So, we're doing our best. We're making some improvements. There are trip-ups on the way, as Terry alluded. We know that there have been some errors, and we're trying to fix them. But there's lots of positives, and I don't think anyone should lose sight of all the positives. That we've got a stadium and a ground that we can all be really proud of, and that's why thankfully, the supporters are still turning up in great numbers to watch the team. And most of the people I speak to are extremely happy at that situation.
Going to go straight into the commercial sections. And the first question is, why is there only one mascot per home game? Because this limits the amount of income that you can make from it. So the best person to ask that is probably somebody who was a mascot.
35 years ago next month.
It was pictured with Warren Park.
Yeah, that photo normally gets trotted out at a 0 or 5 birthday year by people that want to remind me I was thin once, but which is very kind of them. Look, I think our reason for doing that is, and for the same reason that I enjoyed it when I did it all those years ago, was because it is a proper experience for that individual. They get taken around the changing rooms, they're looked after on a one-to-one basis. I mean, it really is, their day in the sun. And the feedback that we've had, both from Nathan, who looks after them, down to the way that George and Craig and the players interact. You read some of those stories, and even a hard-nosed person like me goes, "Oh, it's actually quite sweet," and it does take you back to my glory days of April 1990 when I met Bill Williams for the first time. He was about 5 foot taller than me at that point, but no, that's the main reason. It's just to give everyone that real personal experience.
The next one is about the club shop, and it reads, why won't the club shop listen to fans' ideas for items to sell other than the same stuff every year? We go to the other club shops who have a lot more than we do.
I'm not sure, really. I mean, it's of course it's a valid point. It's a sort of criticism, and all questions like that are valid. But I think the club shop is an interesting sort of issue in itself, because we are very fortunate to have Helen Terrell and her team of volunteers who have run the club shop from the word go. And the key word there is volunteer. And within the realms of what's possible, while she's had a job to do as well, I think she's done a tremendous job in doing everything that was needed and that is needed to run a shop. And yes, indeed, you can criticize and say there should be this and there should be that. But whenever I've discussed the shop with a group of people, everybody has had a different view as to what should be done, or what products should be sold there. So nobody will agree on everything. And I think the system that we've got, and Helen and her expertise and her efforts, which are fantastic, as I say, she's a volunteer, have meant that we've provided a really good service. It could be better, it could be bigger, but under the circumstances, it's a fantastic service, and it's enabled the club to generate more profit than we'd otherwise be able to do with a full-time manager, for example, of the shop. And again, that would ultimately impinge on the playing budget. So it always comes down to this, that you have to take decisions and make choices. Terry and I do that virtually every day about how we're going to try and run the club, and there are compromises to be made. So we try and improve things. We try and add new stock, new variety within within reason and within what Helen and her team can actually manage. If and when Helen decides that she's had enough of it, or she retires, we'll have to review how we run the shop, and we may then be obliged to consider fully salaried and professional staff. But that's for another day. And while Helen is still running the shop, I'm absolutely delighted, and long may it continue.
There's one more question before we get to the really meaty stuff, and that is, why don't we do an early bird season ticket?
Well, the short answer to that is we've considered doing that in the past. We have done that in the past. I know, perhaps not every season, but we certainly have considered it. It's a tricky one when you're not quite sure which league you're going to be in. It makes it very difficult to do early stuff, because if we do get promoted, we may not know until mid-May, and normally we'd like to start selling season tickets before then. So it's on the table for discussion. I think we will do an early bird this season, which will be an offer regardless of which division we're in. In other words, there'll be a kind of bonus if we were to get promoted. You'll have tied in your early bird season ticket early. But it is something we do reflect on and try and do every year, and we will try and do it this year. It's very much on the table, and it's under discussion right now.
Yeah, I think that was more specifically, I think it was just this year that there hasn't been an early bird. Before that, you could buy it at a discount if you purchased it before, I think it was a certain date in mid-June. So is that something that's coming back this
Yeah,
summer?
it's as I say, it's something that's being discussed with Bob, and like there's quite a few hot topics actually. I mean, there's a number of urgents that are on the table at the moment to do with the new kit and to do with the new payment provider and the season ticket and the pricing for next season. Again, subject to which league we're in, which division we're in, is on the table. So I think in the next week or so, we'll make an announcement as far as that's concerned.
We move to the question of ownership, which has obviously been a fairly heavily debated topic for a while now. Now, the first question we've got here is, are the owners currently in the process of searching for new investors who can help the club progress further up the leagues in the future and bring further upgrades to the stadium, which is obviously something we've talked about?
I think there are two questions there. I mean, the first question is, are we looking for new investors? What the investors might then have as a strategy is a separate issue. But the answer is yes, and we have made no secret of the fact that for the last few years, we have certainly been looking out for people to whom we can pass the club on, who will be good stewards of the club going forward, not just anybody, but good stewards going forward. We also wish to recover most, if not all, of our loans. We've been effectively the club overdraft for the last 14 years. And, the club and the ground, the stadium, certainly has a value. And we wish to have, let's say, a respectful approach in those terms. We certainly expect we'll end up having left a lot of money on the table. I don't think Terry and I have a problem with that. It's a kind of something we'll be proud of as a legacy to the club that we love, to leave that behind. But we would like to recover, as I say, at least most of our loans. At the moment, our loans together are roughly 2.5 million. And as I say, we're the overdraft facility, effectively, of the club. While I think when cash was relatively strong at the end of last season, we repaid some of that overdraft. And this season, we've had to extend the overdraft. It's an up and down affair. But going back to the actual sale process, we've had conversations over the last few years, as supporters will be aware. Nothing has happened for various reasons. It's a big ask to find somebody who's got sufficient millions to be able to, as I say, pay us a respectful price for the club, and also to have enough funds available to take the club further forward with the sort of amounts you need to build the infrastructure. We talked about it earlier. There's some considerable amounts. So I think our first wish is to try and identify people, one or more people, who can stabilize the club, take over from us, hopefully bring new ideas and new funding to the club, and move it forward in a sustainable way. We've got one or two conversations still ongoing with investors who have shown an interest and seem to be serious about buying the club, and we've also got one or two interesting discussions with people close to the club who are interested in buying a minority stake at this stage, possibly extending it in the future. And so we are now opening our discussions to people who might come together with them and be interested in buying less than 100% of the club. And we could envisage putting a small group of like-minded investors, business people who love the club and who want to move it on, and perhaps together they could be stronger than one individual coming in on his own. So we are now very much open to that. We're happy to go out to our to the public and also to our business partners to say, look, this is now a time for you to consider getting involved with as part of a group of investors. And we're also considering, this is initial, so don't get too carried away, please, but we are now open to the idea, which we're exploring, of seeing whether supporters could be interested in combining in a form of a trust to take smaller shares in the club and to get involved capitalistically in the future of the club, perhaps taking 10% in the form of a trust, and in some way securing the future of the club at the ground in the long term. And again, if that were possible, and as I say, it's very early stages, we're exploring the possibilities, the feasibility of that. If that were possible, it would be another fantastic legacy for Terry and I to secure in some form a kind of veto right that the Supporters Trust would have over the future of the ground.
Probably covers the second question, which is, has anyone shown any interest in buying the club in the last 18 months? And if not, what do they think the reason is?
I think that the one thing you have to remember, it's going back to when Terry and I took over the club in 2010, is that in contrast to a number of clubs at our level that have been sold in the last few years, in many cases, take Truro, for example, which was bought by a consortium of business people, Americans. A lot of the clubs are basket cases, and they're bought for literally nothing. And the owner or owners that come in then throw money at the playing squad. They don't have to actually buy facilities because they're renting a ground from the local authority or something like that. I think Woking was the same. They had American owners a few years ago. And then those American owners 3 years later got into all sorts of trouble. And I don't know if you might remember, there was a sort of bleating announcement by one of the owners saying he'd wasted £3 million and he'd borrowed another £500,000 from his parents, and he didn't know what to do. I mean, it was a real sort of basket case. Now, in our case, when we came in, the club was about to go bankrupt and would have lost absolutely everything. There would have been no ground. So the club would have probably spiraled down into the sort of levels that it spiraled into in 1992. But as it was, we were obliged to spend, I think in those days, of our money, Terry, it was about £3 million building a stadium worth £5 million. And that's, if you like, the challenge or the slight difficulty we've got is that somebody coming in to buy the club off us has to come up with at least £2.5 million just to start with. And they get a fantastic asset, a wonderful supporter base, a club that attracts a good crowd, a good business model, but it requires a lot of capital up front. And that's put off, obviously, a number of people. We have had a lot of contacts from people I would call time wasters. We've had one or two contacts from people who are very good supporters of the club, but we haven't been able to agree terms. And we do, as I say, we do have ongoing conversations. I think I said to Terry only a couple of days ago that one of those conversations is as good a conversation as I think I can recall over the last few years. So we are hopeful that as we don't get any younger, in the next few months or year or two, we can find a solution to moving the club on to new and positive investment.
In answer to the second part of the question, Fred, the reason, what is the reason that we haven't been able to seal the sale, really? Because we've got very specific terms that we have to adhere to, and one is that we have to be convinced that the football club will continue to play football at the Gallagher Stadium for the foreseeable future. And a number of people haven't convinced us that they had other motives. And of course, we do own the freehold to this site as well. So that attracts a number of people, the wrong sort of people. So that would be one reason that some have been put off, is because we've been quite clear that it's a football ground, it's a football club, and it has to continue to do that. And it is a site with massive potential, like some of the questions coming in are quite right. You know, we could develop the corner, we could put stands in, we could put a hotel by the river, but that will require somebody coming in not just to buy the club for the amount of the overdraft, which is Oliver and my loan. It would have to be someone who's got a vision for developing the club into the National League, into League Two, and lots of other commercial opportunities. So we're quite clear that we're not going to just sell up and run, because this is, otherwise Oliver and I would have wasted 15 years. I mean, the 15 years we put into this for absolutely no return at all in financial sense would be completely wasted if we sold it to a property developer who's just going to knock it down and put 700, 800 houses on it. So maybe that's put a number of people. But as Oliver says, it's not like another football club. We've got 15 years of successful trading. We've got a freehold. We've got terrific fan base, which can only get bigger. But this is a serious business, and we're looking for a serious investor to look after the 15 years that we put into it. Because it's not just 15 years of not being paid; it's 15 years of profits that we haven't taken, which are simply reinvested into the ground, and they're the sort of things. Whilst it's a great potential for a sale, we're quite clear that we're not going to just up and run.
Well, I think the final question to follow up on that then is, I mean, I walked here past the site of the London Road Retail Park. Have some of the people that have approached you been obvious predators who've just been looking at the land and have thought this could be the site for a great housing estate or a retail park?
Yeah, the answer is yeah. I think there's two groups came down. One group were very plausible, had lots of money, and the first question he asked was, "Is there anywhere else that Maidstone United could play their football?" I thought, "Oh, I said that's not the question I was expecting. That tells me that you've got different motives for wanting to buy this piece of land." So yeah, the answer is probably yes. I don't think we'd be deceived by anybody. I think if somebody did come in, we're not going to be conned. We weren't born yesterday, and we would want evidence that they were going to continue playing football at the Gallagher. And it wouldn't be evidence; it would be a legal requirement.
I think that wraps up the podcast. A big thank you to Terry and Oliver for joining us today. Big thanks as well to Fred for putting those supporter questions. And we'll be back with more podcasts in the very near future. Thanks very much indeed.